We've been hosting dinners like this for 10 years up and down San Francisco, San Jose. And I'm really excited to be here tonight to hear from these amazing women and to meet each other over dinner, drinks, and conversation.
Nothing has changed in the world of television in terms of how it is bought, sold, or measured in 70 years. The way people measured TV and bought TV and demonstrated the success of TV up until a couple years ago was the same as it was 70 years ago, which is a little bit insane. So what I'm going to talk to you about now is kind of why we're in this business and what the opportunity is and why it's super cool to be working in TV right now.
It's been a crazy ride, and on product, we've learned a lot. So I'm here to share with you some of the learnings from my product experience here, and primarily the learning that listening to your customers is the first step in creating awesome products.
Our team is responsible for ensuring that LiveRamp systems use personal and company data ethically. And right now that means working to make sure our systems are privacy compliant. If your company works with personal data, you've probably heard of them, GDPR and CCPA.
I'm a software engineer on the infrastructure platoon, and I have an obsession with making builds easy. So I'm going to talk about how I got to that point and a lot of the mistakes I made along the way. So next time you have to do a migration, you don't have to do them.
And I'm the VP of applications for product. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about the history of privacy.
I want to talk about how I manage distributor teams. You should choose something that will allow you to grow and be happy at the same time. Learn about us and, connect with us. We would love to keep in touch.
Thank you for coming out to the Girl Geek X dinner at LiveRamp. My name is Angie, Chang. I'm the founder of Girl Geek X. We've been hosting dinners like this for 10 years up and down San Francisco, San Jose. And I'm really excited to be here tonight to hear from these amazing women and to meet each other over dinner, drinks, and conversation.
So we also have a podcast. If you guys want to check it out, rate it, give us feedback, let us know. We have mentorship, intersectionality, finding career transitions, all of these things. So definitely go and check it out. And this is Sukrutha.
Hi, that was Gretchen. She didn't introduce herself. So we started off with dinners, we talked about podcasts, and then we made it happen. In the meantime, we started to do virtual conferences, which we've had now one every year in the last 2 years. And fun fact, we now have what is Zazzle, a Zazzle store with our amazing branded cool swag. I don't fit into the t-shirt that I ordered, but you could get tote bags, you could get, cell phone covers. It's really cute. So somewhere in the back, maybe you'll see what our pixie characters look like. It's not up, but if you go to the invite for tonight, you'll see these little characters that we have represented, and we try to be as inclusive as possible. So all of our branding is very inclusive. Please share on social media everything that you hear tonight from our amazing speakers. Use the hashtag #GirlGeekX_LiveRamp, and we'll follow you and retweet and reshare. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you to LiveRamp. Do I have the mic to you?
Hey guys, I get to go first. So my name is Allison Metcalfe. I am the GM of LiveRamp's TV business. So just for context, what that means, LiveRamp, a couple of years ago, we moved away from functional leadership 100%, where I was actually previously the VP of customer success. I've been here almost 6 years. I started customer success. I was patient zero a long time ago, and I will never do that again. So a couple years ago, LiveRamp has historically been really, really focused on the digital ecosystem and the cookie ecosystem. And there's been a lot of changes in the industry that suddenly made TV a very, very compelling opportunity. And so we launched a TV business that I run. And so what I'm going to talk to you about now is kind of why we're in this business and what the opportunity is and why it's super cool. It's really fun to be working in TV right now. And hopefully we'll get a couple converters from it. So TV is So crazy. Nothing has changed in the world of television in terms of how it is bought, sold, or measured. I need a timer here. Sorry. In 70 years. So literally like the way people measured TV and bought TV and demonstrated the success of TV up until a couple of years ago was the same as it was 70 years ago, which is a little bit insane. As you probably know, you think about yourselves, you are not watching, Seinfeld at 7 o'clock on NBC anymore. It's not appointment viewing anymore. You're streaming it. You're watching TV really whenever and wherever you want. Every single screen that you have is a TV today. Which is really great for us as consumers. Like TV has become very, very consumer friendly, but it's caused a lot of problems for the industry. So number one is the way that we're measuring it, ratings, is really hard to track now, right? Nielsen is the incumbent measurer that would say, this is how many people watched Seinfeld last night. They were able to do that because of a pretty archaic panel that they had and pretty archaic methodology, but it was accepted and it worked for a long time. But now the network, so think NBC, is they're putting all their money on This Is Us, right? And Nielsen is saying, this is how many people watched This Is Us last night. And NBC doesn't believe them because they're like, well, what about all the people that watched it on video on demand? And what about all the people that watched it on Hulu and Roku and all these other places where they could be streaming that versus just on appointment viewing linear television? So the audience fragmentation is making the networks feel like they are not getting enough credit for the viewership that they are actually driving. That translates to they are losing money, and they don't like that, right? The device fragmentation is also causing problems for brands because the brands, all they want to do is reach you, right? If they are trying to reach young parents who are in the market for a minivan, they don't really care where you are. They just want to make sure they're reaching you. TV used to be the easiest way to get phenomenal reach within one buy, right? Because everybody was watching Seinfeld at 7 o'clock, and we knew who they were. Now we're all over the place. This creates a big problem. If you're a brand, you're like, oh my gosh, how much money do I spend on Hulu versus Roku? How much do I put on linear television? How much do I, what other devices are there? There's so many, I can't even think of them all. So it's a really big problem for the industry, but it's good, right? Because change is good. And again, it's very consumer friendly. So what we call advanced TV is the process of anytime we are using data and automation to buy and sell TV, which again really was not done before, that sits under the umbrella of advanced TV. This is a roughly $80 billion industry. That's the TAM in the United States. Historically for LiveRamp, we made $0 from the television industry up until about 2 years ago. So it was a whole new TAM for us, which is very, very exciting. Of that $80 billion that used to be bought and sold in the traditional way up until advanced TV came, now we're seeing projections of $3 billion being spent in addressable, which I will explain. Close to $8 billion in OTT, which is anytime you are watching television due to your internet connection. It doesn't matter if it's on your phone or your computer or your smart TV, but if you're watching it because of the internet and not because of your set-top box, right, that's OTT. And then we're also seeing a lot of companies, like a really interesting trend is a lot of the direct-to-consumer companies like Stitch Fix or Peloton that are 100% digital companies are starting to spend a lot of dollars on television as more advanced strategies are becoming available to them. The other thing that's happening here, guys, that's really, really important. Facebook and Google are coming after TV hard, right? They're like, we want to keep growing at the rate we're growing, but we already have like 80 or 90% of the entire digital ecosystem. So how do we keep growing? We're going to steal money from TV. That's what we need to do. And we're going to do that by saying we have all the eyeballs that TV has anyways. And so that's another reason that the industry has to change to combat Facebook and Google. And I think the demise of television is very overblown, as you can see by these numbers here. So we power the future of advanced TV. When we talk about advanced TV, we're talking about all of these things. So addressable TV is literally the idea that you are getting a different ad than your neighbor, right? Rachel here is a big camper. I am not. You shouldn't waste your dollars showing me commercials for camping equipment, but you should show it to Rachel. So addressable TV is meaning Rachel's going to get the camping commercial. I'm not. Based on my set-top box, we power that. Data-driven linear TV is the idea of if you have a target audience of, say, young families in the market for a minivan, we will match that against a viewership data asset so that the buyer can understand that young families in a market for minivans are over-indexing to This Is Us and what's another TV show? Modern Family, and they're really not watching The Voice or whatever it may be. So you're still buying TV in the traditional way. You're not targeting a household. You are still buying based on content, but you're buying that content because you are much more data informed. I talked about OTT, digital video. This is clips. This is, Jimmy Kimmel had a great show last night, and there's a clip of him and his funny joke. And we might want to. You're all being forced to watch an ad before you can see that clip, as you probably all know. And then probably the most important, exciting thing is measurement. So historically, the way TV has been measured has been brand lift awareness, surveys, and reach. Now, given the fact that LiveRamp, and we have a couple other companies that can do this too, we recently made an acquisition of a company called Data Plus Math. We can marry viewership data, that's ad exposure data, to outcomes. So now Peloton, for example, can say, aha, my investment on This Is Us drove this many people to my website. That was a good investment for me, and I'm going to crank it up on This Is Us, for example. LiveRamp plays in all of these places. A lot of companies that are getting into the TV game usually are only in one or two of these areas. So it's really exciting. I'm going to wrap it up there because we are a little bit crunched for time, and I'm not going to bore you with this, but I hope that was somewhat valuable and interesting to you, and thanks for coming. Thanks.
Okay, hey everybody. My name is Tina Arantes, and I'm on the product team at LiveRamp. Been here about 5 years, so not as long as Allison, but enough to see us go from 70 people in a little office in the Mission to Mission to 3 floors here and over 800 people. So it's been a crazy ride, and on product we've learned a lot. So I'm here to share with you some of the learnings from my product experience here, and primarily the learning that listening to your customers is the first step in creating awesome products. So this may sound very obvious, everyone's probably duh, how else would you do it? But when I'm out there talking to other product managers through interviews and in other ways, it turns out a lot of people aren't talking to their customers. And it's actually super important because especially in the B2B business, I'm selling into marketers and I'm not a marketer. So if I'm not my own customer, the only way to figure out and empathize with them is to actually get out there and listen to them. So I'm also a big fan of design thinking, right? So the only way you can create a product that your customer is going to want to buy is if you first empathize with them, define the problem you want to tackle, ideate to come up with solutions on how to solve it, and then prototype and test. So the empathize part is actually the part I'll focus on first, which is how do you get out there and discover what are the problems your customers are actually facing. So let's jump right into it. How do you actually listen to your customers? The first step is actually just showing up. It sounds simple, but you'd be surprised how many times you'll have someone on Allison's customer success team reach out and be like, hey, can you answer this question for this customer about this thing? And the first thought most PMs have is I could, but how about that person does it because I have other important things to do with my engineers. But actually, a lot of the times it's sometimes useful to take advantage of the opportunity to get out there and just meet the user and start to establish trust with them so you can ask them your own questions and get to know them better later on. So step one is just show up, make time in your calendar to find customers that are representative of your user base and get to know them. So once you're there and you're in the conversation, you can't just jump right in with the hard-hitting questions, right? You have to establish a base of trust. So warm them up, buy them a cup of coffee, introduce yourself, ask them about them a little bit. The way we do this actually on a larger scale at LiveRamp is through customer advisory boards, where we actually organize getting some of our best customers together into a room, take them off site, somewhere where that they can actually spend a few days with us, give us feedback on the roadmap, and tell us about some of the biggest problems they're facing. And that's been actually one of the really big sources of customer, input and feedback that we've gotten. So you can do it on a small scale with a cup of coffee or organize a whole event to get out there and start talking to your users. Okay, so once you have the customer, you warm them up. Don't, again, just jump in there with what you want to say. Start listening to what they have to say. I don't know how many times I've just been blown away by being okay, what's keeping you up at night? What are your biggest goals? What can you not solve? How can we help you? And they come up with all kinds of ideas. I would never think of, sitting at my desk trying to imagine what they might want to do. So be an active listener. Listen to what they have to say, and don't try to lead them to the solution you have in your mind because you're so smart and you know how to solve their problem. But you also should ask juicy questions as well. So once you've given them a chance to talk, then you should have done your research and know who you're talking to and know what kind of questions you can ask to really get at the heart of what you're trying to solve. So these could be, discovery questions, asking about what areas of problems they're having to help you come up with solutions later on that could be products. Or if you're in a stage where maybe you've talked to a lot of customers and you have an idea of a problem you could solve, is putting it in front of them and seeing how they react to it. Do they get excited and be like, where do I sign? Can I buy this tomorrow? Or are they like, oh, okay, that's interesting, not that important to me right now. So yes, you can ask your questions as well after you've done your share of listening. Okay, and after the interview or after you talk to your customers, what happens next? Now the hard part happens where you have to map it back to everything you've heard from every other customer you've ever talked to. So definitely write these things down, keep them somewhere. I sometimes find notes from customers from 5 years ago, and I'm like, oh, hey, that problem still exists. Maybe we should solve it. And then you start to look for trends, right? You want to see, is it a problem multiple customers are having? Can I identify 20 customers that have the same problem? How urgent is it for them? So people have all kinds of problems, but is it in the top 3? Or is it number 20 and they're like, you could solve it for me, but it's not really going to matter. And then the important part, are they willing to pay for it? You can ask, hey, if I had this next month, would you buy it? And people will let you know yes or no there. But let's get real too. So earlier I said a lot of people don't actually end up talking to their customers for various reasons. Of course, time's always an issue as a product manager because you're running around crazy with your engineering team, trying to keep sales happy, lots of internal squeaky wheels to keep from driving you crazy. But you do need to make time to talk to customers. And even once you have the time, I know as a PM, all of these thoughts popped into my head, right? What if they don't want to talk to me? Who am I to go knock on the door of a Fortune 500 company and be like, can I have an hour of your time? But it turns out most of the customers really do love talking to product and love providing their input in hopes that it'll impact the roadmap and asking their questions to you as well. So you can turn it into a value exchange, offer your thoughts on the vision of the product in exchange for their input as well. This one's one of my favorite. What if they say bad things about my product? I know you get very attached to your work, right? And you don't want to show up to a customer and they're just yeah, no, I hate it. Your baby's really ugly. No one wants to hear that, right? It's terrible. But it's better to hear it so that you don't walk around thinking your product is the best thing ever when really there's some things you could improve. So it'll happen. People will say bad things. You just have to deal with it and take the feedback as a gift. And then this one also comes up. I know a lot of product managers are I don't really want to get on the call. What if they ask me something that I don't know the answer to? And it's that'll also happen every single call, but it's okay. You just have to be I will find you the answer to that and pull in someone who does know the answer for the next call. So there's a lot of resistance to getting out there and talking to your customers, but you got to do it. So what does success look like when you do this right? And when you don't do this right, so maybe starting with when you don't do this right, definitely over the past few years, I've made tons of mistakes not vetting things carefully enough with customers. One stands out in particular where we had a project and we're oh, we'll just make this product go much faster. Because we had a few customers who were yeah, that would be great. Jeff laughing back there because he's the engineer who built it. So we built it, we launched it, and then no one wanted to buy it. We were what? And it turns out it was a problem for people, but it wasn't something they were willing to pay for. So now we always check oh, great, it's a problem. How much would you pay for it at the end? And it does work sometimes as well. So we're working on another product now that we actually got the idea from talking to our customers. Different customer advisory boards, they're how can you help us, share data between two partners? And we're oh, that's an interesting idea. Maybe we could help you there. And it's turning out to be more successful and more people are willing to pay for it because of the hard work we put in, checking with a really large client base if this is going to be interesting or an urgent problem to solve and something they're willing to pay for. So that is why I think listening to your customers as a product manager is one of the most valuable things you can do, and the first step in creating products like people actually want to buy. So, yeah. And we're also hiring on our product team here, definitely engineering team here. So if you want to chat later about any of this, I'm happy to talk more.
Hey everyone, my name is Eloise Dietz and I'm a software engineer here at LiveRamp. I've worked here for about 2 years and I'm currently on the data stewardship team. Our team is responsible for ensuring that LiveRamp systems use personal and company data ethically. And right now that means working to make sure our systems are privacy compliant. If your company works with personal data, you've probably heard of them, GDPR and CCPA. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what this privacy compliance looks like and why it's relevant to software engineers. So first, a little bit of background. LiveRamp takes data privacy very seriously, partly because we think it can be a competitive advantage. We work in data onboarding, which means that we help companies advertise to their users online, which means that they can better personalize their ads online. Studies show that consumers actually really prefer this ad personalization and a more of a customized experience, and it can be it has a higher likelihood of a higher return on investment. However, there's also people are losing trust in technology companies, and research shows a majority of people worry about how tech companies are using their personal data. In fact, one study found that 80% of people will leave a brand if they think that they are using their data without their knowledge. So companies in in ad tech like LiveRamp have to deal with this dichotomy, and they need a way to resolve this problem and gain trust back in their users. And I think that GDPR is a really important step in this direction. So GDPR is a data privacy law that aims to regulate data in the EU, and it took place on May 25th of this year. So CCPA is kind of the California equivalent to GDPR, and though it has many differences, it also incorporates a lot of the same ideas. It will take effect January 1st of next year. So a lot of other states are following California's example and also have privacy bills in the process. A lot of other countries are also inspired by GDPR around the world and are going through the process of introducing their own privacy laws. More are expected to follow. So as you can see, GDPR is kind of inspiring an overall shift in regulation of data privacy. And in the US alone, 68% of multinational companies have spent between 1 million and 10 million getting ready for GDPR. And as CCPA approaches, only 14% of US companies say they are fully compliant, despite its similarities to GDPR. They plan to spend another $100,000 to $1 million becoming compliant. So we can see that these laws are really causing a big shift in how companies think about data. And the reason that is, or we can look into why that is by looking at some of the key GDPR requirements. Obviously, GDPR incorporates a lot more than this, but I thought that these were some of the most relevant to software engineers. So the first is data minimization, or the idea that we should only collect data on users that we need to solve a certain task and then delete that data as soon as the task is accomplished. The next is that data subjects or individuals have certain rights to interact with their data. So they have the right to access the data or retrieve all the data a company has on them. They have the right to restrict processing of that data or opt out. They have the right to delete that data, and they even have the right to rectify the data if they think it is incorrect. And then finally, users have the right to be notified of data collection and the use that data is going to serve. And if you got a ton of updated privacy policies this year, it was probably from this part of GDPR. So these seem kind of like standard practices, but they fundamentally change how a lot of companies think about data. The company is in a data grab mode. They might not even realize what personal data they have on people. Nonetheless, what its use was for and how to collect it and return it to an individual if they ask for it. So this is what data privacy does not look like, and what data privacy actually looks like is constantly asking yourself these questions as you build systems. So the first step is understanding what personal information that you have and that your system processes, and then associating with that data why it was collected, where it was collected, and what use it's going to serve. Data minimization is probably one of the most relevant to software engineers. It means reviewing your data and deleting it when it is no longer needed. But this also means not logging personally identifiable information. It means when you store it, not storing it raw, storing it pseudo-anonymized. It means restricting access to that data to only those who are required to use it. And it means not using real data in your dev and staging environments. And finally, also automating user rights for deletion, restriction of processing, and access. So at LiveRamp, as we kind of went through this checklist of how to make our systems privacy compliant, we realized that there are some cases where we even need to go beyond the law, beyond GDPR and CCPA, in order to design for the privacy of the end user, not just design to make our systems compliant by these privacy laws. So the first one of those instances was creating a privacy vision to hedge against the many data privacy laws that are expected to come out. So, for example, these laws are going to differ. CCPA and GDPR differ in many ways, and in some points even completely contradict each other. One example of when they differ is this right to opt out. So CCPA says people have a right to opt out of data processing, whereas GDPR says people need to actually give their consent and opt in before data is allowed to be collected. I think that for users, understanding the way that you can opt out so many different privacy laws is an undue burden on the users. So LiveRamp decided to have a global opt-out repository where if someone wants to opt out an identifier, say a mobile ID, cookie, or email, we pseudo-anonymize that information and store it in a global repository. This means that deployments in the EU, as well as nationally in the US, can check to ensure that they're not processing data over any identifier that is in this global repository. So going beyond the laws and having a clear privacy vision that opt-outs will apply globally not only made our LiveRamp systems more straightforward, but also ensures that the end user is actually receiving the privacy that they're expecting. Second, never let privacy come at the expense of security. So in the effort to make users be able to better understand what data companies have on them, laws like CCPA and GDPR may actually be opening up this data to bad actors and more vulnerabilities. For example, the right to access their own data means that someone could make a fake access request and maybe receive another person's data. So I think users may not understand that this security comes at the risk of privacy, and it's up to this privacy comes at the risk of security, and it's up to companies to make sure that this does not happen. So finally, embedding privacy into the user experience, I think, is an important place companies can improve on. So especially the ad tech ecosystem is incredibly complicated. This infographic shows the number of ad tech players has increased significantly over the years. Users shouldn't have to understand how all 7,000 players interact in order to understand their data privacy rights. A survey went out after GDPR that asked users what their biggest complaints were, and the study found that most people's biggest complaint was the long, overcomplicated privacy regulations. And though these may be privacy policies. And then though these policies may be required by law, I think that the systems should be designed to incorporate the end user's privacy in mind and make it easier to work with the systems in order to find the best privacy policy. So this doesn't necessarily mean having a accept all or opt out of all policy that often doesn't work with most people's privacy. And it also doesn't mean having so many different privacy settings where you really have to understand the privacy law in order to understand what you want. It means designing for the end user and creating a concise, intelligible, transparent, and easily accessible way of working with the privacy, working with your own privacy settings for that company. So my end takeaway is to take GDPR and CCPA as a way to rethink your data usage, but also looking beyond these privacy laws and consider the end user when designing your systems in order to truly protect their data privacy.
Now that the first half of our session is over, does anybody have any questions for the speakers?
A quick question for you. I actually didn't realize data minimization was an example because your users out. Is that even an option? Data minimization?
A user opts out, as in the fact that we're still maybe storing like a pseudo-anonymized identifier. So the idea is that personally identifiable information, I think this is right. The idea is personally identifiable information needs to be minimized, but when you pseudo-anonymize an identifier, it no longer counts as personally identifiable. So by storing that anonymized version, it no longer kind of counts as the process, I believe, is allowed for opt-outs.
Hello, I'm Erin. I'm a software engineer on the infrastructure platoon. I'm working specifically with DevOps. And I have an obsession with making builds easy. It's absurd. All the engineers here can say that I've bothered them with everything. So I'm going to talk about how I got to that point and a lot of the mistakes I made along the way. So next time you have to do a migration, you don't have to do them. So for first off, I'm going to be talking about Jenkins. Jenkins is my best friend. If you don't, anyone here know what Jenkins is? Yeah. So Jenkins is basically a tool to get servers to do what you want them to do. You're like, I want to deploy this, send it here. I want you to set a cron job, do this. I want you to build this, do this. That's what it should be. So we start our journey with a horrible Slack message. Hi, I snapshotted the wrong thing, and I don't have a backup, and we don't have our configurations. We have lost our builds. As you can see, Jenkins is on fire there, and our last backup had been 10 months previously. Stored everything on the master server, and we had just demolished that. So we panicked, we figured it out, we got our builds back, but realizing that we were storing our configurations, core thing that we need to do to deploy on the thing that if it goes down, it breaks it, not the best situation. So we came up with a solution, Jenkins files. So basically, it's codified builds. You put a Jenkins file into your Git repository. It lives there. You can take Jenkins down in a heartbeat. I almost did that as a demo, but I didn't want all the OCs to panic. And instead of storing your configs in a UI like this, you get 7 to 8 lines of code, and that's your entire build configuration, which is pretty awesome, and it's very replicable. You can version your code. You can pick a library. You have so much more control over your environment. So previously, these were my steps to get there. Let me say this was one of my first larger, known, visible projects that I've ever led. So here are my steps. I create a product. I just have the teams do it themselves, and then I'm done. Easy, right? Not quite. So first off, I skipped over scoping out the size of the migration. I didn't realize how large the project was and how different it was. I'll give you scope. We have over 250 Java repositories. We have over 150 Ruby and Rails builds. All of these builds have PRs and master builds. So if you do the math, that roughly puts to 700 things that you have to migrate that you can't break, because if production breaks, you can't deploy a fix, you're in trouble. So I didn't scope out the size of the project. It led to some very troubling times. The second was I did not ask for input from the engineering team until I was well into development. A lot about listening to your stakeholders. I didn't know what they needed or what they actually wanted from their builds. But I was like, I know better. I've seen a Java build. You've seen one Java build? You've seen them all, right? No, that's definitely not the case. And lastly, I didn't ask anyone for help about their experiences with it, what they'd done to really build it. Other people had experienced Jenkins, but I sort of ventured on my own, thinking I could plow my own path. That didn't work out too well either. So a lot of this boils down to I didn't communicate with people. I didn't ask them, and I broke a lot of things, and I'm still very sorry if you guys are watching this later. And I think lastly, I assumed that the teams would do the work. I assumed that if I presented the 7 lines that I needed to do, everyone would adopt it, everything would work, and everyone would go in the same direction at the same time, and it would be fine. That's not it, because guess what? Everyone's builds are different. They're unique, and they're just different and unique. And I assumed they would do that. I also didn't assume that they didn't want what they had. They wanted something better. You want to build your own solution, and you want to have power over how you deploy and where you deploy. And I didn't listen to any of that. I didn't listen. I also pushed changes without telling people because I didn't version it first. I didn't listen, and I didn't communicate with the team. So that was the biggest thing. If you take away anything from migration, over communicate and talk to everyone. And I mean everyone. So these are my steps to a new successful migration. Do your research. I didn't. So I didn't break down my problem. I didn't even figure out where my share was. Where should I be living? What needs to get done? What's broken? What can stay broken? Talking to everyone, I just didn't think about it. I didn't break down the problem into objectable sizes, and I couldn't get the iterative feedback because I didn't check. I was I'm going to roll into this and it'll work. Which leads into break up the project into bite sizes. Because if you know what you're getting into, believe it or not, you can break it up into smaller parts. I'm a rock climber. And so whenever I go outdoors, I go and I look at the mountain, and I'm like, cool, what do I need? I need to be able to solve this section of the climb and this section of the climb. And this is how I get to every single portion. And I always break it down into bite-sized steps because you're oh, it's only 1 reach or 2 reaches or, I don't know, a high knee. Pick a move. And it works a lot better to get to the top. And if I haven't said it enough, communicate. just communicate with everyone. I didn't get feedback early enough. I didn't iterate on feedback. And I created a doc, a roadmap for it, when I had already been working on the project for 4 months. That wasn't the efficient way to do it. I got excellent feedback from stakeholders, but it took me too long to get to that point of starting a feedback cycle. The next 2 come hand in hand. Roll out gradually. At one point in time, I had 355 PRs open, various repositories, because I created a script to create a PR to inject my one-size-fits-all Jenkins file. And there was no back out. It's hard to rewrite those, and it was broken. It was hard because I didn't version it. I didn't have an interface. And so if I had to make a change to a function, I had to make 355 individual commits to everything. They're starting to get customized. So I didn't have a rollout plan, which means I also didn't have a backup plan if I needed to roll back what I was doing. So successfully, you need to have backup. You need to be able to bail if a rollout goes bad. And finally, you just iterate and repeat over and over and over and over again. And if you keep these steps in mind, the best thing is everyone wins. Everyone gets the product they want. You don't waste cycles on trying to build something that they don't want. And you actually get help along the way, and it speeds it up. So that was me about how to migrate way better than me.
Questions for Erin?
Part of it. The story, it didn't have the date on it. It was 2018, November 2017. It was right at the end.
Before Thanksgiving. Okay. Any other questions? All right.
Hey everyone, my name is Rachel Woolen, and I'm the VP of Applications for product. And I'll echo what Tina said, we're hiring. I've been here about 5 months. And I think Eloise did a great job of kind of helping everyone understand a lot about the regulations of privacy. Today I'm going to talk a little bit about like the history of privacy. So I will kick this off by telling you a very private story. So maybe over Christmas, I got engaged. And before I asked my partner to marry me, which said yes, I had to get through her parents. And I was way, way more nervous about this step than talking to her. And I'll tell you a little bit about our parents. They're from Singapore. They're native Chinese. And I had met them twice. So I had a lot of things going for me. So I sit down with her parents. And I managed to, it's Christmas. And I got all the kids out of the house. They went to the bathroom. It was great. I had like 15-minute window. And I was really looking for not permission, but their blessing. So I sit down with them and, I say, hey, I'd really like to ask your daughter to marry me. And mom's like, okay, I'm going to sharpen my pencil. She basically pulls out a list of 20 questions that she wants to ask me. She's asking me, what were your past relationships like? What, do you have kids? I'm like, no kids. Do you want kids? When are you going to have kids? All these questions. And I think I'm doing a really good job. And this whole time, she's actually translating in Cantonese to Mr. Chia. And I think, okay, her mom's holding my hand. Things are going really well. And I'm like, okay, this is over. She's about to give me her blessing. And then all of a sudden, Mr. Chia's English gets really good. And he looks at me and he says, what do you do for a living? How much money do you make? And this is not something that even I've talked to my parents about. And, it kind of struck me that privacy is really contextual. And, I tell this story because privacy isn't one thing. It's not something that is just regulated by one country or a group of countries. It's something that is very meaningful to each individual. It is different based on your race, your age, your gender, your socioeconomic status, your sexual orientation, where you live, where you're from, what religion you grew up in, really everything. And privacy is, each person's privacy might even change over time. And, what I think is also an important context about privacy is it's a relatively new concept. So I'm going to show you guys some really cool technology that has, helped evolve privacy. So the first is the printing press. So silent reading was really, one of the first forms of privacy, where people kind of had internal thoughts that maybe they were writing them down, maybe they weren't writing them down. And that really took 500 years to evolve. Internal walls were huge for privacy. Previously it had been kind of that one room house where people lived, and they kind of all slept in the same bed for a long time in the entire house. And, fast forward to the 1900s and the camera came around. And the concept of the right to privacy actually came to being. And what I think is interesting about this is that we didn't really even put laws into place around privacy until post-Watergate, right, 1974. And then fast forward to today, AT&T is, you can pay AT&T $30 to opt out of ad tracking, but most people don't do that. It's really, the concept of privacy has evolved. And, I think really you have to think about privacy from the standpoint that there's a value associated with privacy and people are willing to trade privacy. There's a currency. And, how many millennials are in the room? If I offered you a pizza for 3 of your friends' email addresses, would you That's what I thought. And so I just spent a couple of weeks in China. And if you go to almost any street corner in China, you will see these cameras. And what they're basically doing is tracking, what do citizens do? Did they walk across the street? Did they jaywalk? I jaywalked this morning, so my social score would go down. Did they, did they go through a red light? And all of these characteristics are being collected as part of a social privacy score, right? A social credit score. And so really, in this case, one of the reasons why China introduced a social credit score is because in 2011, I think I saw some stat, 2 out of 3 people were unbanked in China. They really wanted to accelerate, people getting credit and being able to buy houses. And so in 2015, they actually made their privacy data available to 8 companies, including like Ant Financial, which is owned by Alibaba. And so today, I was talking to one of my coworkers about, his social credit score, and he was saying, well, I definitely don't yell at my neighbors. I don't park in a parking spot that's not mine, because that's going to ding me, and I want to, use whatever the version of TSA PreCheck is, right? They get a better line. If you have a high social credit score, you get a better line at the airport. There's a different car in the train. There's even, a different, you can skip the line at the hospital. So there's a lot of benefits. And, really privacy can be traded for societal value. So then the question is, I a lot about design in our project org. And how many people here have designed apps for Android or products for Android? So it's really freaking hard. And I would say designing privacy is a 10x problem of that. And so this actually was a pizza study where people there were 3,000 people that were asked to trade their friends' email addresses for pizza. 95% of them did. and that's kind of what I think is interesting here, because Tina aptly said, ask your customers what they want. But the most interesting thing about the study is customers actually said, oh, no, I would never do that. The people in the study said, I would never give my private information. And then they targeted those same people, and they all did. So this is one of those situations where you really have to actually think, is anybody in here familiar with privacy by design? Cool. So what privacy by design is, it is a framework that you can use in order to start thinking about, does my product really protect the privacy of my? And so you can think about it from at the very beginning in discovery and start asking questions, to try to understand the needs of your users. You can look at it as kind of a review process. We have a data ethics team at LiveRamp. We have what's called a cake process, where you can actually start to think about probe through right before you even start building. Does this match our privacy standards? And then, I think a lot of, the government laws that have been put into place, great from the perspective that it raised our awareness around privacy, but it's really our responsibility. And so I'll leave you with one final thought. So this is actually privacy. Our phones are just spraying, our private information at all times. And so, try this brief experiment. Turn off location services on Google. Does it still work? So I did this for 2 weeks, and it kind of drove me crazy. And what's interesting about this is I actually had to go into a separate set of settings to completely turn off location services. And the cynics may say, oh, it's because Google wants to track you. They want all your data so they can sell your data, blah, blah, blah. And I actually think that this was really a design decision, because they knew that you actually want that blue dot. And you want that blue dot because you get value from it. You are willing to trade your value and maybe even go and kind of look and see, Like maybe you don't want to trade all of your location data, but maybe some for that value exchange. So in conclusion, treat data like it's your own and make privacy happen by design. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. My name is Akshaya. I'm the engineering manager for the integrations group. And I work with people like Jeff, Sean, our head of engineering, Andrew, who's our biggest women ally here. He has 3 daughters, and when I told him we are hosting a Girl Geek X event, he's like, woohoo. So that's Andrew right there. And Jacob, who's in my team, he's awesome, and he's supporting all of us. And, I work with all of these people every day. And now I want to talk about how I manage distributor teams. And my of champagne. So that I want to give a glimpse of how many offices we have globally. So this is our camping experience. We have socials. This is a dog-friendly office. We have a lot of fun here in SF. Our New York office. So we are on 5th Avenue, where all the shopping malls are. Philadelphia. Seattle. Burlington. Erin Bolkins was supposed to be here, but she had another commitment. Yes. I have a lot of French people in my teams. London. Asia Pacific, China, Nantong. That? Muted it because I knew how loud they were. So let's talk about all these teams that you just saw, right? So I manage 2 teams. I'll soon be managing 4 teams. And most of the both the teams that I manage are currently within United States right now, but it may spread out to China. So this is the headquarters where most of my team sits, but not all of them. There are some people out there in the New York office, and there's one in Philadelphia. And I also talk to the people in Arkansas, because I like them. You saw how fun they were. And some of my team members, like I said, are French, and they like going back to France to meet their family and sometimes work out of their homes. And is that normal for LiveRamp? Yes, but you don't necessarily need to be French to work out of your home. So what do I do first thing as a manager? Whenever I, start managing any team, I do what Erin said. Listen first. So I kind of ask them, what are their preferences? Do they have any time commitments? Some people have kids. They need to leave at certain times. Some people have soccer practice. Some people need to work out for health reasons or for any other reasons. And some people, like not having meetings at a certain time. And we chat a lot during our one-on-ones. Jacob is nodding his head. He knows why. And so we have all these preferences, and East Coast people have their preferences. So how do I manage the priorities? Like, how do we all, deliver against a shared vision? So I go back and make notes, and I'm like, so if we have dedicated set of meetings for the team to talk to each other, that's number one. You're all one team. You all need to get along, whether you like it or not, and you need to talk. And how do you establish that, right? Before I started working for LiveRamp, I was working for a company called McKinsey, right, across the street. And before that at Intuit. And it's like each company has its own culture. At that time, I was married, but I didn't have kids, so it was a piece of cake, right? And then I got pregnant, and then they flew me to Canada. Ask me how that went. My feet swelled so badly, I couldn't fit in my shoe. And not that, and I sent a picture to my husband. Once I got 2 different shoes, and I couldn't even see it, And I was like, yeah, sure, right? Time difference. Just wake up when you're pregnant. You love waking up when you're, pregnant, and you like everyone you meet when you wake up, right? So that's how that went. The culture doesn't mandate you to go and sit with someone to be productive. You could as well be on blue jeans. You can, I made my son's appointment after joining LiveRamp. And then I could come back and take meetings, take knowledge transfers, talk to people, be productive. You're not judged based out of, where you work from, okay? That's number one. Second thing, as a woman who went through all of this, I kind of make sure that I don't step on other people's toes or schedule meetings when somebody has an important thing, okay? And if you are working with East Coast people, I tell all my teams, you better have those meetings for 2 p.m. Pacific. Otherwise, don't have shared meetings. And if you do want to have shared meetings, ask that person if it's okay, get a Slack message saying yes, and then you're going to have that meeting. And, make sure that you don't keep it as a recurring one. So that's one thing, coordination. And following the right tools, right? You need to, whether you follow Agile, Kanban, whatever it is, or whatever form of Agile your company follows. I know Agile means different things for different people. But you need to get your message across to the team. Everybody needs to talk at least for 10 minutes a day and share what they're doing. And, after sharing work-related things, if you want to share anything personal or anything that you want our team to know, like you got engaged or you had a baby or, whatever it is, right? You kind of share it. And, in one of my teams, I tell people, right, just because you're working out of San Francisco doesn't mean that you need to sit here till I leave or or sit here till 6 to make a point. You're going to work on flexible time, and I need to see what progress you made, and you're not blocking anyone, and you're out, right? It's value to your personal space and time while being productive and accountable. That's what you need. Again, I'm going to share my version of what works and what doesn't. So you can as well be micromanaging, or go to each person's desk, or Or like you could start off by not asking questions or over communicating, assuming things, and get the wrong thing, and then pass it on to your team. You lose their trust. You lose their trust with. It's so easy to lose trust when you're managing distributed teams. Then micromanaging. Who loves these people in this room? That's what I thought. And then people start leaving, and you wonder why, and the cycle repeats. If you're not listening, if you're not watching your team, the cycle repeats. What works? Get the wrong thing, but you learn and adapt. People make mistakes. It's okay. As long as you're not consistently making them, you're okay. You're going to learn, and you're going to share what you learn. Sharing is not on the screen because I ran out of space, but you're going to share what you learn with your teams and communicate closer. Talk to them, drop messages on Slack or whatever messaging service you use. Add any relevant process, not process for the sake of process. And relevant process that works for you and whoever you're working with. Are you pair programming? Are you a software engineer? Does this process work for you? Fine. If you're in product, maybe you're talking to customers, there's a different process that Tina or Rachel may use. I don't know. But as engineers, especially here, in the Valley or New York or all the places that you work, whatever works for you is the best process. That's what I tell my teams. And effective collaboration. Effective collaboration. Destructive feedback is not effective collaboration. Rambling is not effective collaboration. Putting down others, sarcasm. You're maybe the best, most intelligent person, but if you're not nice, you're out. It's as good as that. So play nice. And teamwork. Teamwork is success, according to me. If you don't work as a team, you work in silo, you may be the best person in the world, but if your team doesn't see what you do, or if your team doesn't find value in what you do, you don't have any business value with the work you're doing, or you don't grow, you don't let others grow, you don't help anybody or mentor people, that's all contributing to bad culture. One of the things that I really like at LiveRamp when somebody spoke, like during my onboarding, was that if somebody sends you an email, you respond quite quickly. It's in other companies that I worked at. Response right away meant that you're supposed to work or respond back at some time, right? So now studying at Wharton, Sean, our head of engineering, at his level, or Andrew, or even Jacob, or whoever, Jeff, if you send a message to them, and I work from 1 a.m. to 4 a.m. because I need to study when my son is sleeping. Some of you may resonate with that, some of you don't. And you can judge, and I'm crazy partly. But that's my time when both my dogs are asleep and my son is asleep. That's my time, okay? So what do? I catch up on all the emails, and I told my team, if I send you a message on Slack or an email, do not respond to me outside office hours unless it's really urgent. There have been nothing really urgent that needs a response. And I was surprised when I sent a message to Sean one day, and he just responded at 2 a.m. I'm like, what did I see? Did I see a response? And I'm like, thank you for messaging. And he, it's like, you may choose to do that, but it's at your own volition. You're not forced. And I think I tell all my teams, right? If you see it, ignore it. If you don't want to, if you're sleeping, do not wake up because of me. Snooze your notifications. And basically, there's a saying, right? You don't go to work when you enjoy what you're doing. It's not really work or something like that. And I think when you join a company that values your personal space, your ambitions, and offers you opportunity to grow, and you love what you're doing. There was recently a job satisfaction survey at Wharton where I'm studying part-time. It's like in my group, and when I say group, it's about so many people in one section. People did a job satisfaction survey based on so many different metrics, and they're talking about organizational stuff and how do you grow your teams, what is effective, what's not, somewhere around this, but in a more lecture-y fashion. And I took a survey of my past job and this job, and it was one among the top 5. And I'm thinking, I did the right thing, right? When you love what you do, your stress goes down, you're happier, your kid kind of sees you're really happy, right? You don't go crazy, and you can actually do what you want to do, study, take up a hobby, rock climbing, or do a side project on Android, I don't know, whatever you want to do. Don't do that. So yeah, it's like, the last thing I want to leave this room with is like this. Professionally, you set an example for your team. You don't need to be a manager. Each person can be an individual. You set an example for your team. And if you overburden yourself or you don't enjoy what you're doing, your team can see it and your productivity goes down. So make sure wherever you choose to work or whoever you choose to work with, hopefully at LiveRamp because we have openings, you should choose something that will allow you to grow and be happy at the same time. And that's what the whole talk was about and what all the speakers and organizers want. And hopefully after this presentation, you come by and say hi to all of us and hang out with us, ask us questions. Learn about us and, connect with us. We would love to keep in touch. In any case, thank you.